everybody. Welcome to The New Normal. I'm your host, Lisa Davis, aka Litecoin Lisa. Today, my friend Andy Scheckman is joining us from Miles Franklin Mint. You guys can check out my links in the description below to find out how you can reach Andy and get the family discount and handled with kid gloves, of course. But we want to talk about what to do to protect your family during times of crisis right now. We're living in very uncertain times. And I want to get as much information. Of course, I think that's the best way to protect your family first. So we're going to pick Andy's brain and find out what's going on in the precious metals markets and how we can look forward to protecting your family's wealth and assets right after this. So give us a like and share this video. Hi, Andy. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Nice to see you too, Lisa. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So there's so much happening in the world right now, and I really want to do the best job I can educating the community on how to protect your family's wealth and assets. And I think it always starts with education and also watching, what's happening in the markets and what the big guys are doing. I noticed that there was a couple articles out about the central bank specifically buying gold and silver at the highest level since like the 80s. And some of it's being done in secret. Like some central banks, I guess, are reporting how much they're buying, or even Japan, I guess, wasn't necessarily buying so much, but they disclosed that they have been holding a lot of gold. I wondered if you could give us some insight on that and why we may be thinking about or should think about doing some of the same things for our family.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, the banks have bought. First of all, thank you for having me. It's great to be back again, and I appreciate it very much. The central banks bought more gold in 2022 than in any time in the last 55 years, the second most on record ever. You're seeing a massive accumulation of not just gold, but also silver too, by the world's central banks. And I think in general, the biggest money in the world, excuse me, the most sophisticated money in the world, you could call that the central banks, they front run everything. And in this case, I would argue that they're using the suppression of price to run cover for them, for their massive accumulation. And, you look at a country like India, who bought 304 million ounces of silver last year. So it's not just gold. That's more silver than is in the entire COMEX universe. There's only 34 or 5 million ounces of silver backing what's called the registered category on COMEX, which are the bars that are available for delivery, backing the bars. India imported 10 times that amount this year from not only taking delivery off of COMEX and the London Metals Exchange, but also from large imports from Switzerland. So you're seeing the big sophisticated money front run what is an eventuality in economic problems, and using gold, I guess, as their solution or as their shelter from this impending storm. So yeah, and when you talk about countries like China, who are typically very, very private in the way that they accumulate their gold, and they don't like to tell the world about it. They bought 15 tons this last month, 32 tons the month before, and 30 tons in November. They're telling us that their gold reserves are up to 2,025 tons, if you believe that. Okay. Alistair McLeod, who I believe is one of the smartest minds on the planet, will tell you they have 15 times that amount, that they have somewhere in the neighborhood of 38,000 tons, where the state supposedly owns 20 and the people owning 18. we supposedly, I say supposedly, own 8,300 or so metric tons because Fort Knox hasn't been audited since 1956.
And
So,
when it was, people still doubt that audit.
right, right.
From what
And
I've
so
heard, yeah.
if you believe it, and we're supposedly the largest holder of gold in the world, and China's telling us they have 2,000 tons, but Alistair believes it's much, much more than that, because not only are they the largest producers and accumulators of it, they're the largest importers of it, and they don't sell an ounce, basically. So, yeah, they would by leaps and bounds have us, way more gold than we do. But although China gets all the attention, you look at a country like Turkey, who
Yes.
just joined the Brics nations. They bought 148 tons of gold last year. That's the most gold out of all the central banks. And again, what the Brics nations have told us is they're going to issue a reserve currency pegged to commodities. And so, yeah, I think the central banks have been on a buying spree, to say the least. And it's I think something that is hidden by the rhetoric and by the price suppression that is so pervasive. So many people need that instant gratification, and that's not quick enough for them. And when they see the price in a counterintuitive manner move down when the world is aflame, it's exasperation. I understand that. I get that. But I think what you have to realize is that is exactly the misdirection. Think the art of war. Beating your opponent without throwing a punch. This is exactly how the world is de-dollarizing, and doing it without the world being the big money. The central banks, the commercial banks, the sovereign wealth funds, they're using this suppression to their advantage to position themselves outside the dollar, because the dollar is ending its run, I believe, as the sole reserve currency, at least as it pertains to the petro status.
I remember we were in Utah. Ben and I were in Utah speaking at the University of Utah. And it was the first time that China and Russia had just decided to do a deal outside of the petrodollar. And I was screaming, warning, it's coming, like this is happening, and people just were like, oh, it'll never happen. I have friends that I really respect that still say the US dollar will always be the most mighty dollar, not because it's backed by the petrodollar, but because it's backed by the US military. What do you say to that?
Well, I'd say that would be true, and has been, if we're talking individual countries. And even a decade ago, China couldn't stand up to us. But you put China and Russia and India and all of these countries that are joining together in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Brics, and the Belt and Road Initiative, all of them together, you're talking 80+% of human population. They're not only are their GDPs much stronger, but so are their military presence. You put China and Russia together, the one thing that they do have, and God forbid it ever comes to something like this, is hypersonic ICBMs. That we don't have that technology. At least that's what the State Department said a few years ago. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. It's mutual annihilation. But they have the largest standing military in the world, the Chinese do. And then you add all of these other countries together, it's a very formidable alliance. And so I would argue they do. And, it's a valid. I also hear the argument, well, all of these countries joining together, look at what happened to the European Union. They all had different ideologies and histories, and that didn't work. And I agree with that too. However, what are the Brics nations telling us? First of all, the Brics nations, they rotate their presidency every year or 2 or 3. I'm not sure how many it is, but they rotate their president. There's not one power source. It's not just China. It's not just Russia. I think this year the presidency moves to South Africa. They all have equal say. But how do you make it work? The rallying cry is standing up against the West and their perceived hypocrisy and the sanctions and the hegemony and all of these things that are making the countries want to come to the table. The glue that makes it stick would be backing it by commodities or by gold. And we've been told by the BRICS nations that they are going to issue a reserve currency, and it will be pegged to commodities. We originally were told it would be pegged to a basket of commodities. There's more rumbling that it may actually just be gold. We hear the Shanghai Corporation Organization, which is 50, 60% of human population in and of itself, that says we want to create a settlement currency for the entire Eurasian continent that will be gold backed. So how do you make any of these systems work? You use commodities to give everyone equal footing at the table. You already have a rotating form of a presidency. And then you use distributed ledger technology to show the veracity and the immutability of what everyone is pegged to the ledger. And that's the Chinese digital yuan that has been 5-6 years worth of successful trades now to the tune of north of $25 billion. That would be the rails by which a new currency instrument is rolled out. And all of the countries that come to the table and pledge commodities, whether it be just gold or a gold and hydrocarbons and oil and wheat and sugar, whatever it may be, it's all pegged at a certain ratio to a distributed ledger technology for the world to see. I think that's how you make it work. It's not about one entity leading the way like the Bundesbank or Brussels. It's about all of them having equal footing, equal say. The rallying cry is against the West. The glue that makes it work would be the pegging of commodities in an immutable way using distributed ledger technology to show the world, yes, it is here. And the big three auditing companies can come in and verify it. It's all here. That's how you make it work. Now, am I hypothecating? Am I making assumptions? Sure, a little bit I am. I don't know how it all plays out, but you can see with the relationships that are being made, with the rhetoric that's being coming from these countries, with the amount of gold and silver and commodities that they are importing, absolutely, I think it can happen. And it never would have, but you put all these countries together, and all of these countries are the ones that produce and accumulate all of the commodities, while the countries of the West are insolvent, literally insolvent and broke. Then yeah, I think it becomes even a greater likelihood that it happens, to be honest with you.
So that sounds like a terrible outcome for the West, of course, for all of us. But I also think, before we go into the hopium story, which is where I want to end up, I want to go a little bit further on this narrative of, because I've done some research on these CBDCs, and I could see what you're talking about, the BRICS nation, and then what rolled out in Davos a week or two ago, or 2 weeks ago or more, with that CBDC, and it partnering with a stable coin. And each of these countries could use their stable coin to engage with the CBDC, so their central banking currencies, and then using stable coins to engage and not have to have the gas fees passed on in their central banking currency. It could be passed on in that stable coin issued to the client or the person at the end point in that way. Do you see that as like the ultimate kind of end of the dollarization, those two partnerships coming together, the central bank currencies and the Davos CBDC platform with that stable coin?
Well, I think it's the beginning of the end. I mean, if you look at what happened a few months ago, you had the bridge, which is...
That's what this is. That's
right.
It's another form of this, but it's the Davos version.
Right.
And it's got 20 banks plus 6, it's 20 participating with 6 observing, and a hyperledger. I mean, it's like the most evil version of the bridge, you know.
And I don't know, I'm not up to speed on the Davos, and thank you for telling me about it. I'll do some research. I'll tell you that the
I'll send you an article.
Yeah, please do. The bridge platform, which was made between China and United Arab Emirates, I want to say Singapore, one other country, I'm not positive, third country, but anyways, it allows for cross-border trading of central bank digital currencies, sidestepping the SWIFT system. We just saw the exact same thing happen here last week. It was announced between Iran and Russia. So all of these countries are using the central bank digital currency first and foremost, which they were told by the Bank of International Settlements that they had to have an operational one by 2025. So that's step number one, the ability to trade back and forth between these two countries without going to the intermediary US SWIFT system bank is step number two. The third step would be a Brics one currency where they could maintain their own central bank digital currency, but also go directly into the Brics platform from there. And that's when things get really frightening. So yes, I think it's definitely the beginning. And look, central bank digital currencies are coming. There's no question about it. And the speed at which these countries in the Eurasian continent are developing them and testing them is very, I think, enlightening if you're following closely enough. And it speaks of de-dollarization. And I was just on with Jean-Claude just a couple minutes ago, and like I said, it just seems to me that something serious is taking place, and it seems as though the governments are either preparing for war, or at the very, very least, they are de-dollarizing. And what better way to de-dollarize than to create a system that allows you to trade with your allies and not go through the SWIFT system? And that is the crux of what the West uses to sanction those people who don't behave, so to speak. And yeah, I think it's an eventuality, it's inevitability. I don't know much about the Davos version, but I'd love to see it. It fits hand in glove to really everything that I've been thinking about for a very long time, however.
Yeah, I'll send you my notes that I have from doing my research on that, and then I'll send you a couple articles on it as well. But I also wanted to talk about, before we get to Operation Sandman, because I really was interested when I heard you talking about that on another interview with somebody, I can't remember who that was, but we're talking so much about gold and these countries buying gold, and not so much about silver, but we know that the silver price is so depressed and manipulated, and with the massive consumable industrial use, and the fact that it is consumable in medications and in technology, do you see the case for silver, buying silver now, being smart for people to do, for the lay person to purchase silver versus gold, or a time where people would buy silver now and then it would be smart to turn that into gold later, or where maybe gold would be used as money in the future because you wouldn't even be able to keep silver because it would be a humanitarian use in the future?
Well, first I have to say I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Bix. You know I love you, Bix. And Bix introduced me to you, Lisa. And I love Bix. I find him to be one of the most intelligent, sweet guys I've known in 34 years in finance. And I mean that to my soul. This is where Bix and I slightly deviate.
Okay.
I, like Bix, will tell you that silver is the most undervalued asset on the planet, that this is a generational type of opportunity. You don't see investments that are this undervalued and this utilized in dual capacity in both monetary and industrial, and an expansion in industrial applications through green and digital, and in warfare. There's 500 ounces of silver in the tip of every Tomahawk cruise missile, let alone in all the other missiles they fire. Silver is a strategic metal. It is being gobbled up by countries like India. It is being gobbled up by seeing massive deliveries off the LME, who told us if we see silver deliveries reminiscent of 2022, there'll be hardly anything left at all in 2023. And the same thing off the COMEX. Silver is 100% the best investment, most undervalued commodity on the planet. But where we slightly deviate is that in 2019, the Bank of International Settlements told us that gold is a tier 1 reserve asset, that it is riskless, that it is a high quality liquid asset, that it will be used, I believe, because of these reclassifications, if you will, by the most powerful bank in the world, the central bank, the BIS. It will be used to peg a new system. when you look at a ratio of roughly 80-1 gold to silver right now, that is massively historically an anomaly. It's out of whack.
Okay.
Not only has it had a geologic ratio for the better part of 5,000 years of 16-1, but over the last 200 years, it's averaged roughly price-wise 42-1 because of the Industrial Revolution and logistics and all of whatever the reason may be that it's average 42-1. We're double that right now, and it's only been at this level a handful of times, 4 or 5 times in human history, less than of 1% in the last 100 years. And so it's incredibly undervalued in its relationship to gold. And in fact, it's coming out of the ground right now at a 7-1 ratio. The geologic ratio has been cut in half because it's found in nature in a form called epithermal, very near the surface. Big deposits were found decades ago. The idea, if you believe that gold has a role in the future, look, there are guys like Jim Rickards and Jim Sinclair who will tell you gold will go above 10,000 and never come back down because it will be pegged to a new system. And that fits hand in glove with its reclassification and its massive accumulation by the central banks. If you believe that, and you believe that we will see a ratio that falls towards not only its historical average of the last 200 years of roughly 42-1, which would be a double today if you switch back into gold, but closer to its geologic ratio of 7-1, which would be 11-fold increase, then yes, there is a hell of an opportunity there in the respect that, you know, you could argue logically that silver is 11 times undervalued in its relationship to gold right now because it's coming out of the ground at 7-1 and it's priced at 80-1. So nearly 11 times. So what that basically means is if you bought $100,000 worth of silver today and it falls to its footprint in geology, now think about it. If it's used so copiously, not only monetarily, but industrially, at some point, it has to have a true reflection of what it costs to mine it. So if we get anywhere near that 7-1 ratio, 100,000 in silver becomes what, 1.1 million in gold, like that. Now that's not pie in the sky. The first time I noticed something like this was 2010 when the ratio was 85-1. And I look at it, I'm like, my God, this is the second time in human history it's been this high. And I told everyone who would listen to me, started doing podcasts back then, trade your gold to me right now. I'll sell it to the industry. We'll switch you to silver. And anyone who would have done that in theory would have received 85 ounces of silver for their 1 ounce of gold. And 7 months later, in mid 2011, we had $50 silver and $1,915 gold. That's 37-1. So anyone who would have made that switch and then switched back 7 months later would have made 2.5 times nearly what they started with, or at least double and covered all the taxes. So the answer is Brics is smart. And I wouldn't discount the fact that silver one day, even I was asked by Jean-Claude today, do you think it could go to 1-1? Yeah, why not? 7-1 isn't far-fetched at all. So who's to say 1-1 is? But what I will say to you is that I would not discount gold, even though to Brics's argument, there's a lot more of it out there. I think it will be used to back a new monetary system because the West has screwed the pooch. The West has proven that all governments will choose inflation over austerity, and they will destroy the value of currencies given the opportunity unless it's pegged to something. And that something has to be gold. Silver would not be the place to the asset to use to peg to a currency system, but it has vital uses and it has a history of money greater than gold. So, yeah, the answer is yes, and I don't think you would be destitute if you were stuck with silver and didn't get a chance to switch back to gold. But I do believe that it is a viable switch. It is a viable path or plan. And if you realize that gold really is being accumulated as money by the central banks, by the biggest money in the world, then it's not outlandish. And maybe you do some, you keep some silver, you switch into some gold at a much greater ratio. But I think this trade, buying silver at 80-1 and switching to gold at 30-1, 20-1. I mean, you could do it at 40-1 if you really want to not be greedy and double what you could otherwise buy today. But, you know, wait until it keeps on going. It's the trade of a generation, the trade of a decade. So
And historically, there was a big pullback in silver and gold right before they um, went to that $50 silver. When was that? Was that in the 80s
Well, it's been twice. It hit 50
or
in
twice? Okay.
2011 and it hit 50 in 1980. But yeah, you're right. The price of gold and silver got smashed leading right up
Right
into it.
before that,
You'll
which is
find
where we are
most,
now.
yes, and most markets exhibit great volatility, white knuckle volatility before they take off. So yeah, I think that history doesn't always repeat, but it certainly rhymes. And
Yeah.
I think that you're on to that. And you're someone in your chat there says, Tom says it's at 84-1. Well, that's double its average of the
Wow.
last
Yeah.
200 years. So why not look at that as a viable trade? Whether you switch back to gold or not is debatable, but if you did, there are very few things that allow you that kind of upside potential in an asset that I believe is wholly conservative. So it's a good thought experiment, if nothing else.
Yeah, and I quote you often. I think you're a great mind and a voice of reason in these times of crisis. And it's not about number go up and these false promises that people try to, people tease me and call me the hopium hustler, and all this. But I really am looking for people to have ports of safety and looking for education and resources for their families during these times that are so uncertain. And you said one time on the show, you said, I'm not promising, huge wealth, or maybe you said number go up. I don't remember the exact words, but you said, maybe you can protect your wealth. I'm not, and through this time, through this uncertain time.
Yeah,
And
it's
so
not
it
about
was just so
return.
practical, you know.
Well, it's not about return on your money. It's about return of it. And that's exactly
Right.
what you're doing. If gold and silver are wealth and have been since biblical times. And so it's not becoming wealthy. If you own enough of it, you will be. You own gold and silver because it is wealth and has lived through two world wars, German hyperinflation, the Great Depression, every pandemic. It is immutable wealth, and it will be when the dust settles here too. You can see that. What is the only asset that every central bank owns? Gold.
Right.
And so, many of them are also buying silver. It's just less practical to hold in large quantities because, $1 million worth of gold, you could literally put in a briefcase and sprint to your car. $1 million worth of silver, you're going to need 4 wheelbarrows to do it. It's going to take you a little while to unpack each wheelbarrow load. So the point of it is that, this is not about becoming wealthy. It's about accumulating
Preserving.
wealth in a
Yes.
time of great uncertainty.
Mhm.
And wealth that has outlived everything that the world has thrown at it for over 5,000 years.
Yeah. Well, I know we need to wrap this up. I want to end on a really positive note. I mean, we're giving people a tools, an opportunity. They can email info@milesfranklin.com. Tell them that Lisa Davis or Litecoin Lisa sent you. And like I said, they'll give you the family deal and treat you with kid gloves. They have great, very knowledgeable people there that will make sure you get what's best for you, your family. There's a couple specials this week, but before we talk about that, can you just go over Operation Sandman really quick? Because it's the first time I had heard about this, and it very much goes hand in glove with Bix's Road to Rooted theory, I think.
And it goes very much in theory with what I've been saying for 3 years about OPEC and all of the oil producing
Yes.
countries,
Yes.
Saudi Arabia and all the 13
Mhm.
OPEC producing countries moving away from the dollar. And it basically is at there will be a moment. Now, if you realize that all 13 producing OPEC countries are on the Belt Road Initiative, if you
Mhm.
realize that Saudi Arabia has already joined the Brics nations or applied to join and been accepted.
Mhm.
The president of South Africa announced that recently. If you realize that the Saudis just the other day, well, a few weeks ago, said China is our most important trading partner in oil today and for the next 50 years. And in Davos just last week said we are open to taking other currencies for oil. It is the backing and protection of the Saudi kingdom that has given the dollar the petro status. So if that ends, and all of these countries, to your point earlier, you know, how can they stand up against the West? They all join together and they stand arm in arm with all of these countries, including China and Russia and India and Brazil and South Africa and all of the other countries that are joining. There's 150 countries on the Belt Road Initiative, which is 60-70% of human population. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization, again, 60+% of human population. There's a lot of crossover here. The Belt Road Initiative, you put them all together, you're at 85% of the world's population that are all joining together. And they say, hey, thanks for the memories, we're moving on. And they all dump the dollar like that. Well, that's basically what Operation Sandman is, that these countries have all agreed at a certain point in time, drop the dollar. You have to have your chessboard in place before you do that. But when that happens, everything collapses, because if the dollar is forsaken and dropped, see, the whole world has had to own dollars since 1974 to buy oil. Prior to that, the dollar was the world reserve currency. They already own dollars. But after we closed the gold window and the dollar was backed by nothing, it's the protection of the Saudi kingdom and by extension, OPEC's agreement to sell oil in dollars that has made almost every country on the planet have to buy oil or dollars to buy oil. 90% of all the oil settlement in the world is in dollars. And if they all dump like that and they've got their ducks in a row, maybe it centers around what's happening in the Brics, then very quickly, that's exactly what he's saying. Everything freezes up, locks up, because the byproduct of that inflation is soaring interest rates. As that tsunami of inflation hits our shores, let's think about it. All of the world has had to own dollars. There's way more dollars around the world than we have here. If they all come flooding home at once, this makes what Powell is doing, taking fifth-year college calculus for a kindergarten class.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, because all of those dollars come crashing home, create massive inflation, spike in interest rates, stocks, bonds, real estate, and the dollar all collapse like that simultaneously. It's the Great Reset. And that's what Operation Sandman is. Now, Mike Adams, the health ranger, is a really smart dude also. And I've had the good fortune of being on his show a few times. He's the one who talks about this. I would encourage people to check him out. He's quite a mind. But it's the exact same thing. It's a coordinated dumping of dollars simultaneously. And I don't remember how many countries he said has signed up to this. It's a lot, you know, north of 150 countries that will all simultaneously dump the dollar in favor of a new form of settlement. And it's hand in glove with what I've been saying, only different for the last 3 years, that the dollar will be ditched as the petrodollar in favor of a new Brics currency. Well, if it's that or something different, the result is the same thing. All of those dollars come crashing home, creating massive inflation, spiked interest rates to the moon, and crumbling of all of the inversely correlated asset classes, stocks, bonds, and real estate. It's a scary, scary, scary thought. And unfortunately, I don't think it's too far out of reality. This is why you get your ducks in a row while you still can, and why price is the greatest tool of misdirection. If price was indication
a distraction.
If price was an indication of value, Lisa, then why the hell are the exchanges being bled dry? Why are we seeing such huge amounts of gold being purchased, more so than at any time in the last 60 years by the central banks, the second most in history? So, you know, the last time the central banks bought this much gold, it was gold backed the US dollar. That it was part of the monetary system. This is a whole new game that is being played. And I think whether it plays out the way Mike says, the way Vic says, the way that I've been talking about, the way that Jim Rickards talks about, it doesn't matter. The result of a de-dollarization all at once after the ducks have been put into a row is a very frightening thought. And that's exactly what Operation Sandman is. What Mike talks about is that it's already been agreed upon by all of these countries, and that at a certain point, which he believes has already started, the clock is ticking, they'll all dump dollars in unison. And that way, not any one country gets clobbered. They'll all dump at the same time. And the only one who gets clobbered are those left holding the bag.
Wow. I think, you know, I mean, that could go so quickly. Like you said, I mean, it's all the ducks are in the row, all the pieces are there, all the tools are there. When listening to you talk, I'm thinking about the deals, the pieces that Trump put in place when he was in office, the visits to India, the possibility, the stories that I heard about him possibly saving the Saudi prince. I mean, there's just so much there that I could see that all come together so quickly. And it being a good guy operation, actually, to leave the central bankers, the creatures of Jekyll Island holding the bag.
Well, and you could argue that's happening right now. And it's an interesting thought process because the central banks right now or the U.S. central bank is underwater to the tune of, I think, over $30 billion in operating losses. And, they've loaded up on, since 2008, their balance sheet's gone from 800 billion to almost 9 trillion, most of it in long-term, low interest rate, 30-year mortgages and U.S. treasuries, all at really low rates. And at the same time, there's $2.5 trillion right now in the overnight repo market, excuse me, which they're currently paying 4.5% on, plus all of the excess reserves that they have an obligation to pay the commercial banks to at 4.5% or near that number. So you have all of these short-term obligations at high interest rates against a massive amount of assets with low interest rates that are on the long end of the curve. It's put them upside down. And in fact, right now, when you take a look at their balance sheet, their balance sheet is in tatters. In fact, let me just see. I just wrote the number down here the other day. Their balance sheet right now, if I have it, is, so they have a balance sheet of $8.5 trillion against 35 billion in capital reserves. They're 200 times leveraged. And right now they're running a $31 billion loss in operating losses. And so if this were to increase as interest rates go higher and then this bang interest rates spike, it could just like that wipe out the central bank. And when you talk about the good guys versus the bad guys, it really, could this be the plan? To blow up the central banks and go back to sound, honest money? Absolutely, it could. And especially when you see an entity like the Federal Reserve deeply in debt right now with a balance sheet 200 times over leveraged in tatters.
Wow. Well, you guys, we're going to make this a regular series.
I'd love that.
Got so much great information, and I really think the time is now to get this out to the people. And I hope that you guys will all give these a like, share these with your community, get more people watching this information so that we can get Andy's information out to more and more people, so that we can help build this bridge, bring the community over so that they don't get stuck holding the bag for these central bankers. Let's bring as many people with us as we can. So Andy, thank you so much. I'll see you next week.
I look forward to it. I'll be here.
All right. Take care, everybody.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye.